Streamcast.
There we go. Take two. Hello and welcome to the Streamcast. I am Black Amora. You already know that, though. But I'm here with a very special guest, Andrew Smith from Spilt Milk Studios. Wow, spilt my words there. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Yeah, very happy to have you on. One of the coolest people that I know. We've had you work with us before. And I'm very happy to get you in, the podcast thing, because that's really the flagship content of Streamcast. So, yeah, happy to have you on.
Oh, it's a delight to be invited. It should be a good one.
Absolutely. So, for those who don't know who you are, would you like to give us a little bit of who you are and what you do for Spilt Milk Studios and the gaming industry?
Sure thing. So, I'm the creative director at Spilt Milk Studios. I'm also the founder, which sounds a lot grander than it is, because all you really need to do is, spend 20 quid on a website somewhere and you've got an domain company. And then, hey, I founded the company. It was just over 14 years ago. It was in March 2010, which is crazy. I'm a sort of designer, game designer by trade, I suppose. Like, my career previous to that was like the traditional QA to junior level design and up from there. Most of that was in Dundee, where I went to study at Abertay Dundee for university for the computer arts course to get into games and all that good stuff. So yeah, done my time in the traditional sphere, like AAA work for hire and bigger studios, and back in the day, a bit of XBLA stuff with Capcom, where I was working at Proper Games, and then I left Proper Games to found Spilt Milk around it was 2010, and the mobile gaming was booming. iOS and all that was sort of happening, and you could make a game with two people and get it played by anyone with an Apple phone, which was mad. And then here we are.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into all of that, but I want to take it all the way back before your career. You as a gamer, do you remember your first ever game and console?
I do. The first game that I ever saw, I remember weirdly, which was in a hotel in Switzerland. Long story short, my dad's parents' side were Swiss, and I just had this sort of weird memory, and it's probably sort of slightly dramatized in my head, but like the little games room in the hotel where you'd have like table tennis and maybe a pool table, that sort of thing. And then there was this weird electronic box in the corner making all these weird noises. And I mean, I didn't know what it was then, but it left an imprint. And it was Pac-Man, the like coffee table version of it, where you'd sit either end and like look down at it. So it was old even then. They were, I was sort of 5, so we're sort of talking 1987 or something like that. So that just like, I've got this crystal clear little sort of like supercut of that in my brain that just won't leave. And then the first game that I owned, so it was around 90, I think it was like 93, 94. And so the SNES was out right in the UK, and Donkey Kong Country was out. That was the thing I remember, because it was like that. I saw that, I was like, I need to get a SNES. Like, this is it. And campaigning for Christmas and for birthdays and this sort of thing. And eventually got the box. I was like, oh my god, this is it. And it was a Commodore 64 that my parents had got second hand. And they'd been smart, right? Because they were like, this might just be a fad, this, that, and the other. So we'll test the water. And I was like a generation behind in that sense, right? But they had bought it out of the back of the papers, so they got like 50 games that they parceled out over like 2 or 3 years at like little oh, you did well in an exam, here's another cassette tape, by the way, with a video game on it. Like, oh my god. So that was the first console I had. But I actually don't remember the first game I played on it, although the one that sticks in my mind the most was I think it was a side-scrolling shooter. It was definitely a shooter called Salamander, and I think it was made by Konami. I want to say it was made by Konami, but I might be wrong. But it's kind of like a scrolling shooter. You rock hard. I never completed it, but that's the first one that I remember. Like the box, the sort of title screen, and actually it in motion. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, I've never heard of that game before, so this is why I love asking this question. I feel like I learn something new with every
Well,
guest that we get on.
and how old they are as well. Like, I mean, I just feel ancient talking about it. You know,
How
like
experienced, distinguished, is how we say
I appreciate
heritage.
that. Appreciate that.
So we've heard about your first ever game, but let's talk about your favorite. Do you have a top 5 video games, and what are they?
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, it changes every time someone asks, but um there's games that I've loved, and then there's games that I've had like a huge impact on my life as well, like as a professional, right? And sort of laid the groundwork for my like career, I suppose. So like I don't know about like ordering them in the top 5. I'm not sure I could be that brutal, but one
Any
of
order
them
is fine.
is yeah, one of them's got to be Half-Life for that reason. So that was a game 97, I think it came out right when I should have been like preparing for my GCSEs and then into A levels and things like that. PC first person shooter, like, you know, an absolute classic for a lot of reasons, but primarily it came with tools to mod. So you could actually make levels, you could build Half-Life levels, and that was the first experience I'd ever had of actually making anything in a game, you know. And that was it. From that point, I was done. I was like, yeah, this is my life. I'd had inklings before then that I, you know, oh, could you get paid to make games? Amazing, but I didn't know how. So then that was the start of that, and that's just something that's just been super important to me. And Valve and everything they do, you know, as a result. I think I've got to put Tears of the Kingdom in there. Much more
Okay,
recent, obviously, but
right.
just I genuinely think that it's a measured improvement on Breath of the Wild, and Breath of the Wild was like hands down the most incredible game, right? So emotionally, I might say Breath of the Wild, but I know that like in every sense, Tears of the Kingdom is an improvement, right? So it is better. So I had to pick one of the two, and I go for that. But just that sense of like exploration and like a world that is just laid in front of you, and you can kind of do what you want. I always sort of describe it as a lot of people love like Skyrim and Elder Scrolls games, and I just bounce off them a little bit. They're a little bit sort of janky, a little bit dry for me. And so this
Mm.
is my version of that. It's just that like enormous. You see it, you can go to it. You know, if you can figure it out. Yeah, so that's got to be in there. I'm going to be annoyed at myself for leaving other ones out, but GoldenEye, GoldenEye on the
Oh, yeah,
N64.
cultured.
So yeah, there's like two things here, and one of them is the multiplayer, right? That was the first like competitive multiplayer experience. Like mind blown, completely mind blown. Back then, I didn't even notice that there were like, you know, it was only 14 frames a second or something in 4 player split screen.
Yeah.
What even was that? Who cares, right? I mean, we all care now, and rightly so. But back then, it was just revolutionary, and I think as well, it had a lot in the single player, a lot of incredible design around like replayability, like unlocking the cheat modes and all that kind of stuff. But just the sense of place in it as well. And so this was before Half-Life for me. I think I'm getting that right. Or maybe it
It
was
should
even
be.
the same year. Was it?
I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
very rough
who knows?
estimate, but
Who knows?
I think
Yeah,
GoldenEye was
I
first.
think it was. And it's just incredible. Like the idea, I still remember the first level being stuck at the gate with a padlock on it because I just didn't understand. Like I was like, well, that's just a texture, that's just an object. It's not something you can
Right.
interact with. And then you shoot it off, and you're like, oh my god, and then it just goes from there. So that was a big part. I have to put a Mario game in. I have to because they're amazing. I think I still love Super Mario World like more than the others. I don't know. I don't really know why though. I mean, obviously it's when I was a kid, I was playing it and obsessing over it. But I think it there's something about like the way that the world unfolds, the way that you're sort of moving around a world map, and it all. I'm not saying the Mario series is known for being like consistent with like a sense of place or real world or anything, but there's a consistency to it that
Mm.
maybe other games they haven't really bothered with or they haven't really been that interested in leaning into. But I felt like it was a bit of an adventure, and that's something for me that like as long as a game puts me somewhere and lets me go on an adventure, that's kind of me interested, even across those other games I've mentioned. And then I think I've got to put Res in. Have you ever played
Oh, okay.
Res?
I don't know if you're being shortening Resident Evil or you're talking about a different game.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about Rez, REZ.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a rhythm game of sorts. It was released on the Dreamcast and the PlayStation 2. It's designed by Tetsuya Mitsuguchi, who was like the designer, like lead designer on like Sega Rally and a bunch of other Sega games. And basically, it got re-released quite recently. Actually, there was a HD version on Xbox 360, but then there's a PSVR version, and you can get it on Steam, and it's insane. It's like it's kind of a bit like Star Fox or Panzer Dragoon. I don't know if you're that familiar with those, but like you're traveling into the screen. It's 3D. Your path is fixed, but you can kind of navigate the screen space to dodge attacks, and then you basically use a lock-on attack to shoot down patterns of bad guys. So it's kind of a scrolling shooter, but you go into the screen. But the whole thing with it is that it was inspired by I'm going to get the name wrong, but I think it's Kandinsky, an artist who suffered from had a condition which lets you see sounds, and I've
Right.
completely
Okay.
synesthesia. That's it. There is synesthesia,
Right.
and basically it's colors and shapes and movement associated with sounds, and that's video games, right? So they basically had these 5 amazing levels, each soundtracked by these amazing artists, and then they built the environments around it, and everything pulses in time to the music, and even your attacks and things like that actually are instruments. It's part of the soundscape. And so when you're doing really well, and even when you're not, to be fair, it becomes a very zen experience. It's probably the closest thing I'll ever have to like taking recreational drugs, because I'm that straight laced. So it was quite sort of eye opening for me, and I just a game that's like a lot of games have touched me with like their stories, like overtly, emotionally, and like with characters and things like that. But this is very abstract, and it had an emotional impact on me, and I think I can never forget that. And I'll always play it whenever they like re-release it, or go back to it every now and then, and just because you can play the whole thing in like less than like 45 minutes, really. But it's just about that experience, and it's incredible and immaculately made, like from a game design point of view. So anyway, that's my 5. I'll listen back to this and I'll be like, you forgot like all these amazing games, and I'll start arguing with my past self. But, yeah.
We'll call those honorable mentions. I mean, again, learning about games that I've never heard or played before. Rez, for example, it looks beautiful. Just had a cheeky look up while you were describing it, and yeah, it sounds exactly like you've described it, or it looks how you described it. I would love to give that game a try, because we've seen how successful other games like Beat Saber and games that have incorporated beats in their gameplay have done. And this looks like, obviously, it walked, so games like Beat Saber could walk and run. So it is good to see how far those games have come.
Yeah, I would if anyone out there, that's a really good shout. If anyone's like, oh, I like Beat Saber, or oh god, what's the one where you're like a rock beetle, like a shiny rock beetle going along like a sci-fi sort of thing with music. I can't remember the name of it. It doesn't matter. People all know from that, hopefully.
Yeah, someone in the comments.
Yeah, someone in the comments, please. Yeah, if you're into any of those kinds of games, or rhythm action games at all, do play Rez. And then, if you're able to, the best way genuinely would probably be on a VR headset, like on a modern VR headset with a really good set of headphones. I think it's one of these weird games where it's like, oh, it was always slightly not its best self on a flat screen, but it was, that didn't exist back then, anything other than the flat screen. It's incredible. It's like really stood the test of time and like gotten better for it, which is mad to me. But there you go. Genius.
I wanted to ask you a question based off of what you were saying about GoldenEye. Do you think us as consumers are too critical about stuff like FPS and stuff? Because we have seen games in the last few years, they've opted to do 30 FPS as opposed to going for the higher 60. And do you think gamers instantly just look at that and crap all over it, instead of like trying to give it a chance and trying to understand why they've gone for the lower option? What do you think, as someone who's on the other side building the games?
That's a good question. So like, I would love it if every game was a locked 60 frames per second, right? There's a smoothness to it, there's a snappiness, and I'm sure if you could lock at 120, it would be even smoother, even snappier. But like for me personally, 60 is like achievable, reasonable. The return on the investment of like effort to go beyond 60 is just like, it seems a bit much to me. You know, unless you're competing at like high level like Quake tournaments. When I was at uni, I knew someone who did, and they would turn all the graphics off so they got more frames. You know, and it's just like, nah. But that's to a purpose, right? But I think the crucial bit is the consistency, right? Like I would be happy to play a 24 frames per second game if that was intended and it was locked, so it was consistent. It's when the frame rate varies that it starts to feel really bad, right? Like I could understand someone saying it's at 24 because we want it to look filmic. You know, there's an aesthetic choice, and you know that's what it's about. And I'm like, okay, I'm down with that. And I might not like the game, but it wouldn't be because of the frames per second. I think 30 is just like a reasonable minimum bar. I think anything that's like not performing at that locked, it's like that's a shame, right? I'm not going to throw shade at the people doing the work. Everyone's trying to do a good job. They're all incredibly talented. I'm biased, right? I make games, but like everyone I work with is insanely talented, more than I am. And it's like nobody out there has done that on purpose, or you know, doesn't have the skill to make something run at a decent frame rate. It's always for a reason, and it's usually time and money, right? Like those pressures affecting things. Anyway, that's my mini rant about it. But yeah, like whatever the frame rate, as long as it's locked, that's the thing. So yeah, I think people are really, really unforgiving, and I think it's a shame that has become such a big part of the conversation, because like you see some amazing games come out, and I don't know whether they caught it, you know, caught that particular audience, and then they reap what they sow in that sense, right? But I don't know, like it just seems like a lot of games, some of the first headlines you see and some of the first conversations are around frame rate, and it's like that shouldn't be a conversation. I don't think. Like it's not. It's just it shouldn't be relevant. And I understand when people are disappointed and they invest all this money in their hardware and they're promised things, you know, and then it doesn't happen. That I get, but it shouldn't be about the frames. It should be about the missed promise or the, you know, the disappointment, right? Rather than like, I don't know, than storming the Steam reviews and giving it thumbs down and stuff. I don't know.
Fair enough. Yeah, I just wanted to get your viewpoint on that, and yeah, I think I get what you're saying. Like the consistency is more important than the 60 or the 30, as long as it's, you know, consistent throughout the game. That makes sense to me. So let's talk about you going from a gamer to someone who creates games, a dev, if you will, a creator. How do you make that transition? How was that for you?
So it's kind of, I hinted at it a little bit. So Half-Life came out. I made some levels, and actually Guy I worked with, Steve, we were both at school together, and we would make levels and, you know, spend like the weekend at each other's house, and like I'd make a level and he'd play it and then swap and that sort of thing with bad B movies on the other screen to entertain the other person. Level design takes a while, it turns out. But that got the bug. And then that eventually led up to, you know, having some of that sort of stuff in my portfolio. But fundamentally, I was lucky enough that when I was looking for university courses and being able to go to university, there were a couple of courses around the UK that were sort of steering towards qualifying you with skills that would be useful in games. Abate was the one I went to. Did computer art, and I focused most of it around like design and narrative rather than necessarily art, you know. But yeah, that's kind of what I did. So managed to land a little bit of QA like placement one summer, like 2 or 3 weeks, and then that translated into, oh, you actually done a bit of QA for a company, and that was the thing. I think if anyone's like listening, going like, how do I get in? It's get in any point and have contributed to any game in any like real sense, and then that starts to unlock doors. But it's getting that first one is the tough one, right? Like for me, like completely honestly, it was luck. A friend of the family had worked with someone whose partner was in a QA department somewhere. I mean, like, that's completely absurd. Like, what is that? Like, you can't count on that. So that first 2 weeks was from that, but then from there. But nowadays, like, the thing that I didn't have then was basically like a functioning internet like culture, right? It was too early for that. So nowadays, the version of that I would recommend people do is trawl Discord servers and Reddit for devs looking for testers, and don't go overboard because it's work, and if they're not paying, you should only do what you feel comfortable doing, right, for the credit. But it builds up. It does mean something, especially if you've got evidence that it's like structured in any sense or managed in any sense, right? What people are looking for is trust that you understand like the process and can sort of hit the ground running. I suppose that's the best way of putting it. But yeah, like I went from like reading magazines about games and playing them and just being like, oh my gosh. And then there still is actually a magazine called Edge. And that was one that in the back, like it had adverts for jobs in the games industry. And that was the first time that I realized you could do it. That was that moment of like, oh my God, people get paid to do this. And like, oh my God, some of them are like in London. I live near London, right? Like it was like, oh my God. And I remember there's this like really cringe memory I've got of trying to get get into these sorts of companies as QA or whatever, and just like basically every 6 months I just email the same lot because they're all still there. It's the same bunch, and they'd be like, no, hi again, no, still, you know, like, and I was just like, oh my God, you know, I don't even know how old I was or young I was, but that was the thing. But yeah, and it was just sort of from that moment going, oh, that's a thing, and then learning what I needed to get a portfolio, and then that led. So the portfolio was level design, and that was the first job I got as a junior level design outside of QA. But the QA part of it was like you understand games development. You've worked on a real game, for want of a better word. But nowadays you could just go and make one, right? You can go on YouTube and get some half decent tutorials. I'm not sure there's enough about actually shipping games, but you know, the various bits and bobs and free tools, and you can go and make something. That's what I would be doing now. I guess it wouldn't be a Half-Life mod. It would be a mod for something much more recent, or just a project in and of itself. But yeah,
that's very interesting because obviously the times have changed, and you know all the boundaries and the barriers. New ones have come up, and then old ones have like kind of died away, as you say, with the rise of the internet, social media, and all of that. So it is you're almost like a tweet away from a job at any time. And I noticed you use the word luck, which I'm I thought you weren't a fan of that word.
I don't believe in luck. It's not a thing.
So what's going on, Andrew? Is this inner turmoil?
Well, I mean, it's what we ascribe. It's the label you use, right? But yeah, there was a series of events. You know, that chain is what happened. But there's no like what happened is like I think like my school did work experience weeks, and I asked to be, you know, put in anything with games or related, and they couldn't. So I ended up like being an assistant to my dad's mate, who's a plumber, for 2 weeks, and that was fun because I knew him and it was cool. But then because of that obviously came up in conversation with parents, and then someone was like, "Oh, I think someone's mentioned something about," and then blah 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 blah. So it's like it's not luck, but it wasn't. It wasn't anything I had any control over per se.
Right.
It was very much in my parents and their friends' sort of ball court, and that sort of thing. But good catch. You can be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if you'd take offense to this. It's like dominoes falling, right? And because you've made the right decision X years ago, that got you in the conversation with someone who had the right opportunity for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, I think you can sort of see things like that, and it can feel like really down to chance or whatever. But like, it all starts with making a positive decision and deciding to like try and manifest it. And that sounds a bit sort of like, how really? But like, honestly, if I hadn't made such a faff with the person at the school who was trying to organize these things, if I had just been like, well, because I thought it, or at least I would think I would have thought it, of like, well, no, nobody's going to know how to get me any experience in games, but that's what I said I wanted to do. And, the whole like, oh, is it really a career back then? And all this kind of stuff, which again, understandable. And I could have just not said anything, but I decided to say something. I was like, no, that's what I want to do. And they're like, all right, we'll look. And it's like, yeah, okay, cool. And then, so if I hadn't said that, maybe almost certainly none of it would have happened. It's strange, right?
Yeah, no, credit to you for being so persistent. And I think there are a lot of people who grew up playing games who never quite made the connection. I know I'm one of them. I enjoyed playing games for so long, but I never thought, people make these games. I don't know what I thought was going on. Got churned out of a factory or something. But like, I never made the connection that it takes so many people to make the massive games that I was enjoying. So yeah, for you to go out there and be like, I want to put myself out there. I want this to be my career path. And they don't do a good job. Even today, I'd say the government or the curriculum, whatever the powers may be, they don't do a great job of showing this could be a career. This could make you, your friends, etc. So yeah, good on you for doing all that. Absolutely.
Hey guys, I'm a meathead gamer, probably just like you. I understand the importance of playing Stellar Blade, but I also understand the importance of being in a squat rack. So I got the perfect programs for you. Hammerhead, Shogun, the Tenacity Strength Hypertrophy Method, all of these designed to get you bigger, to get you stronger, and to be like one of these characters on Stellar Blade that don't look like one of these ugly ass monsters. So hit me up at Tenacity Strong and get a copy. It will do nothing but help you achieve your physical goals, and you'll get better at your gaming goals, because when you look good, you play good. All right, y'all have a good one.
So from your humble beginnings as QA, shall I say, talk to me about the companies that you've worked for, the ones that you can at least, or the games that you've worked on. I guess any memories or opportunities that you are proud of over your career.
I'm looking because I've got things on the shelf actually that I've worked on. So I mean, yeah,
show and tell.
Right, exactly. This is the thing. I'll get the. I mean, this is one of a few. The rest are actually in the main office that we have. That sounds nice. Grander than it is. Yeah. So basically, I mean, I'll show. Like, this is one of the games that I worked on in QA. So this was my second paid QA job. This was straight after university. So I graduated and got a job in QA, which is, like it was fine. So this is Viz Entertainment. Just try and get the show off. There we go. Yep. Viz Entertainment. It's a third person action platformer for the PS2. And it was made in Edinburgh.
Oh, so cool.
It was a commute from Dundee where I was living. And yeah, it was really good fun. And actually, so this is just an example because like it'll definitely come up. The industry is a tiny place. Like it used to be a lot smaller, but like it still is in the UK at least. The guy who was my producer there is the like lead or senior producer, like the top producer on Sea of Thieves now. So I occasionally see his face on the Sea of Thieves updates and stuff, and that's pretty cool. A guy called Joe Neat. He's legit. He was absolutely brilliant. And anyway, so yeah, previous to that. So that was my first job after graduating. The job before that job was a summer job at Acclaim in Cheltenham. It was working in QA on Extreme G3 on the GameCube and the PS2 and the Xbox. And I've got a fun story about that one. And then the job before that was the 2 week thing that ended up happening, luckily, at Hasbro. When they had an internal games studio, and this was the person's partner's person, and basically it was just 2 weeks. Yeah, sure, we'll get him in, and whatever. And I honestly, I just played the game and like made notes, and like it didn't really turn into any bug reports or anything. But I was young. And then the guy who ran that department, the guy who I was there sort of ostensibly because of. He moved to Acclaim, but not the Cheltenham office. He went to a different office, but through that, he was like, "Oh, hey, yeah." Like I sort of was like, I was encouraged by my parents to be like, stay in touch with him, and then managed to in the first summer of university, I managed to get a job there for the summer because they needed people to test the game, and that was really great. And the story about that was, so they actually, it sounds worse than it is, but the QA department was in the basement, and it had windows, right? It was just like below ground floor, but it had windows. It was fine. And it was like a big sort of, I don't know, like Regency building stood on its own that used to be God knows what. Like it looked and felt like an embassy or something. It had like a big open like staircase in the front hall and all this kind of stuff. Been converted into offices years ago, but anyway. So they were the whole building. The dev team was in there working on a few games. They were working on a game for a licensed game that eventually got turned into. It was originally inspired by, as my understanding as well, heavily inspired by Alias, the TV series, which is like, it's old, right? It's like 22 years old at this point, but there you go. With Jennifer Garner, it launched her career. Anyway, there was some crunch. It was old school. There was some crunch, especially in QA. So there was a couple of all-nighters, maybe two tops. But one of them, it was like, right, there's, they put food on and stuff, and they're like, we put food on, but if you don't want that, there's also like a freezer. You can just like take half an hour break and have your dinner and all this kind of shit. It was all a bit much. And I remember basically a combination of doing an all-nighter and having a microwaved frozen kebab. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I would not recommend it. I kind of entered this weird sort of hallucinatory state. So there's like this memory, again, like I don't need to do recreational drugs because apparently I'm very susceptible to just normal stimulus. But so that was, so there's the night where I was doing that, and it was all a bit of a like weird fog and a haze, and it's a bit strange. But one very clear thing that happened was, I remember, so one of the big things you have to do in testing is you at some point someone has to play the whole game again, right? Like a bunch of stuff's changed. It's been, I don't know, like 5-6 times we've put an update into the game. Someone needs to check everything. The whole flow works. You just never know, right? So I was doing a bit of that, and it's like play through the entire campaign of this game. I don't know. It was probably like 2 hours long at this point. If I was like, because I was like not really having to concentrate. I was very good at the game at that point, and it's a racing game, right? So it's like,
right,
whatever. So I was doing that, and I remember starting it, and I remember finishing it, and I remember nothing in between. I remember waking up at the end. That's the thing. I remember basically I don't know if I'd been asleep or whether I just completely zoned out. But I completed the game on like true autopilot, and that was like. That was the point at which I was like, "Oh, that's probably not that good, is it?" Like, I genuinely have no memory of the last like 2 hours of my life, and it's God. And yet I've still been playing the game, and it's finished. So it's not like I was like driving into the wall or stuck on the loading screen or whatever. I had finished the campaign, mission complete, and so I was like, "Well, like, okay, I guess that passes then. Like, there's no bugs to report." So that was the thing.
That's a bit worrying.
It's a bit worrying, isn't it? I was like, oh, yeah.
Microwaved frozen kebab, did you say?
Yeah. It's kind of the sort of like Iceland own brand type thing, that sort of like.
It gets worse.
I mean, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody made me. This is the thing. So yeah, and actually talking about N64s and GoldenEye, they had a room full. I mean, like a room full of just old hardware from the testing, right, from the department, all the games they'd done like the previous generation, and there was they were getting rid. They were like getting rid. And I was like, could I just like buy some of these, like, or whatever, like you can't just bin this stuff. I ended up with, I think it was either 8 or 12. It was multiples of 4, basically brand spanking new N64 controllers in like 2001. So this was like after everyone else had like ground theirs out and had like really wobbly and I was like, I've got all of these, and I'm at university and we've got like perfect dark, and anyway, so that was quite cute as well. It's a bit more of a positive spin on it. So after that I I landed a job at Viz, did Brave. And that was QA, and then my first level design job was junior level design at Visual Science, who was based in Dundee, and they would do like racing games for like EA, etc. And worked on a game that sadly got cancelled, and then the company went under as well. They had 2 enormous teams. I think there was over 100 people there at that time. And I remember the day that we got the Xbox 360 dev kit, and like one of the lead artists was like showing off some of the cool stuff they could do, and we're all just like, oh my God. And then out of that, a bunch of companies formed, which we'll get to. In between, I went to Real Time Worlds, who were making APB, which was like a Grand Theft Auto-esque RPG MMO. It was founded by the guy who founded DMA back in the day, Dave Jones. Did not like that place. Much bigger company, very corporate culture. Not about that. That was so I was a level designer, just a normal mid-level designer by then. And then I moved to Proper Games, who had founded out of the ashes of Visual Science. I was employee number 7 I was the only game designer. They had the design director, and then it was me. We grew to, I think, 15 people over the years. We worked with Capcom. We pitched Flock to them and developed that and put that out on XBLA and PSN. We made Final Fight Double Impact, which was like a pack of Final Fight and Magic Sword, which was amazing because I loved that game, Final Fight. And we got to do like what at that time and for a while afterwards was, I think, the best arcade conversion of any game, because there was a period where a whole bunch of arcade games were coming out on XBLA, right, like old retro games, but we actually rendered it on a model of a 3D screen on a cabinet, so you could actually have like the screen bend, and we had like the scan lines and everything in the shaders and stuff. We really went to town. Yeah, that was really, really cool. And then I left there to set up Spilt Milk Studios in 2010. Yeah, it's mad, absolutely mad. That's the journey.
That's an incredible journey with lots of twists and turns, and one frozen kebab. So I feel like you've done a little bit of this, but could you run through the differences between working for a large corporation, or essentially working for someone else, and then working for yourself, starting your own company? What are the pros and cons of each? From your
man, I just hate working for other people. That's the no, I'm
preaching to the choir there.
There's an element of that, right? There's an element of that if we're honest. So I mean, things are so different now that it's hard to sort of use this as like advice for people. There's pros and cons, and it depends on you as much as your situation. But so for me, I've always all my moves, except from visual science to real-time worlds, were to smaller companies. And initially, I didn't really. That's not something I was aware of when I was doing it. But looking back, I'm like, oh my god! And it was just I loved working with a smaller team, having more ownership, and getting more involved in basically everything. And that's basically my job now, is to just whatever needs doing, do it, right? Like I'm still identify as a designer, but my real actual life is like everything except like, you know, I don't actually do any of the things that everyone knows about making games. I try and do everything else so that everyone else is like who's better at it than me can do their job. So yeah, for me, a big part of it was just more creative involvement, right? But honestly, back then, I probably wouldn't have been able to have that like trajectory shortened if I knew it at the start, because there just was no route into games at a small team size. There were no small teams, right? Small teams started the industry with like, you know, like BBC Micro Games and Commodore 64 and the birth, and then it was getting to a point where it's like the smallest team realistically was probably 20-30 people, which isn't big, but it's not small. And then it's especially for like compared to the kinds of games they were making, the projects were enormous. They were for enormous companies, and you just at a certain level you just have to have an amount of like structure, which I like structure, I like process, but like there has to be so many like middle managers and so many processes that aren't making the game that I would get frustrated with it. But to my point is that like when XBLA was sort of arriving, and iOS, the App Store, that was a new wave of smaller teams being able to do things that are like commercially viable and competitive, like 2 people, 1 people, you know, and Steam, of course, during that whole period as well. It was changing the industry. So that sort of coincided quite nicely with my experience. So I went, but to get in those bigger teams where everyone mattered, you know, and they were wanting experience, you know, that's how I had to get, you know, through QA up into level design. Whereas now you know, there's a lot more opportunity, I would think, for people to come to companies fresh just as a level designer, as a what they want to be doing, rather than as a route in. I still think QA is a great thing for everyone who makes games to do, because you understand development on such a level, like you get such insight. But, you know, bigger companies now, and they're bigger than they've ever been, would be able to have the structure where you could go from university or from having a portfolio. It doesn't matter about university, honestly. Just having something that you can demonstrate that I can do this, and then go into a junior position or a graduate position doing that, and they will build your career for you, and you'll get a lot of experience. But at some point, you will probably go one way or the other. You're like, this is what I love, and I want to be like lead this at some enormous company working on some incredible IP, or you'll want to make your own thing, and maybe you want to do that with a big team or a small team or whatever. But the fewer people you have in your team, the more input you have, but the less ambitious you can be in some senses. But that creative satisfaction comes in different ways and from different sources, if you like. I think one thing I can state with absolute certainty is that nobody's job is more secure or less secure depending on in relation to the size of the company they work for, or if they're a freelancer. It's just not a thing. Having recently gone through the process relatively recently to get a mortgage, buy a property, all this kind of stuff. The idea that essentially I run a company, right? But I'm technically, depending on how you look at it, I'm an employee and I'm not an employee. So basically it was a real problem that I run my own company. Right. And it's okay, what does that mean? What do you mean? And it's if I was one of my employees, I wouldn't be having the scrutiny. But because I'm the founder and the CEO, my status is a bit weird. And then similarly, if you're a freelancer, same thing. It's that's weird. But then you look at all of the layoffs and stuff, and you're look, and knowing what I know about businesses and running one now, I'm nobody's runway is enough that you can confidently say, oh, I'll be able to pay off my mortgage for the next 3 years, or oh, this job's secure. There's no such thing. And it frustrates me, as you can tell, that people maybe don't think that's the case or aren't aware of it. I think it's something that's useful to know about. It's mad to me, that people think that working for a company is more secure, or working for a bigger company even is more secure than a smaller company, or for yourself. It's just not true. It's just not true. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird, but that's maybe useful.
No, I think it is, and I think your experience is invaluable. So yeah, I really appreciate your answer. I think that's a really good point at the end as well, because there just seems to be that assumption, whenever it comes to credit or any sort of application for money that you don't have, it's kind of just assumed because you're working for a mega corporation that you're going to be fine. But money is just weird. It's like a river. You don't really know. Everyone kind of depends on everyone else, and anything can happen, God forbid, but no job is secure permanently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a bigger issue that I have with capitalism. But this is, of course, the Andrew Smith special, so a bit more focus on Spilt Milk Studios. I really like the name, and obviously there's no I don't need to do a deep dive into it. But what made you decide to go with it? And tell me about the games that you have developed in the past, including Tango Fiesta.
So yeah, the name first. Long story short, I was founding the company, couldn't think of any good names, and my partner at the time suggested this, and it was that's really catchy. Cool, job done. I like it, and that was it. It's as simple as that. And then later on, you realize, oh, spilt is not a word in the English dictionary. It's an American English dictionary, but it's not in the English. And then obviously, everyone's typoing it and saying it wrong and stuff. But it's memorable. It's very memorable. So that's the important thing. And then also the logo. I got to immediately. I was oh, got to riff on the. I love Blur deeply. And the coffee and TV video, the little milk carton was yep, that's the one. So the games that we've made, we've made a lot of games. We made a couple of games on iOS. Hardlines was the one that was sort of had us arrive back in sort of 2011, I guess it was 2012 maybe. And it was basically the old Nokia Snake game, but brought up to date with a bunch of modes and a bunch of fun sort of little quips that the little snakes do and that sort of thing. The lines, sorry. We made Tango Fiesta. That was the one where we sort of had our that was the second big game from us, if you like, in terms of public knowledge. We actually, so I worked with a few people on and off and sort of put a call out with Andrew Roper, who's the coder on it, and he was our tech director for a long time. And we landed working with Ewan Brock, who's an amazing 2D artist, and Gavin Harrison for the audio design. And we basically we came together initially for a game jam that was sponsored by Creative Assembly, for one of the old Eurogamer shows, expo shows. It was when it was at Earl's Court, so we're talking a while back. And it was a game jam on the show floor, which was a brilliant idea. I thought it was amazing. And we were in there. We didn't know what the brief would be. We went and we, blah blah blah. We like to say that we came second, but we didn't win. But the game was fun enough that we sort of carried on working on it a bit in our spare time, and ended up pitching it to Mastertronic, and then they signed it, and it launched on Steam into early access. And I mean, it was a storied development. Let's put it that way. It was a very ambitious game for what we were trying for our experience level. Like, honestly, it was too much. But there were a lot of factors came into play. Some fun things that stick in my brain are we basically got announced or like launched around about the same time as Broforce, which was wildly better and was like the other 80s themed arcade shooter. And it's like, that game's incredible. And we're like, all right. Like, honestly, it's like, it was our like first game as a team. Like, is that team? It's a miracle it shipped at all, frankly. Like any game, like, it's just a miracle it ships. So that was a bit like, oh damn, it sort of took the wind out of ourselves a little bit, And then we also launched the same week that Valve emailed the industry in general saying early access is a thing that we've introduced, and for a while this, that, and the other, and we would actually recommend that people who are a little bit unsure just avoid buying anything on early access because it's just not for you. And it was like, cool, that's really helpful. I will say again, it wasn't that good a game. It's like, it's fine. It has its moments, and like some stuff's better than others, but like, it's like a solid 6. If you love 80s movies, it's maybe a 7 or an 8. So I'm not blaming the performance of the game on any of this, but that was another sort of like, oh man, like really, especially it's like first game as a team and could be the big thing. And then the other thing that sticks in my brain is Mastertronic went under as a publisher, and that was between the early access. No, it was after our 1.0 launch. So we were in early access for about a year, and then they went under. And I mean, it's not like they did this on purpose, and people lost their jobs, so it's horrible.
Yeah.
But also, their bank account held all the money from the first month of sales, which is the biggest month of sales, and we never saw it.
Oh no!
Oh my god! On the plus side, we did just defer automatically to being a publisher on Steam because they had to give it to us, and Valve did that, and that was like, back then that was actually like, ooh, we can just release games on Steam now. Now it's a lot easier, but back then that was like a bonus. So hey ho, and we did like patches and updates and this, that, and the other. And it never really performed well enough for us to like really push it. Sadly, it got ported as well, and that wasn't like brilliant. And it's just like, oh well, and again, amazing that it even came out because games are incredibly difficult to make, and it was our first time on anything of that scale. So, and then I mean, you fast forward to the pandemic, and specifically, all of there was that period in America where there was let's say like a lot of the sort of unrest that you wish we were beyond as a society in general, and we were just sat there feeling just generally pretty down about the state of the world, and then we just sort of like, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, in sense of like, what they're like, all we're doing is making games here, we can't help in any way, and it's incredibly frustrating, and you see a lot of like noise and not a lot of action, and we just, I mean, I don't know if we would do it exactly the same way that we did it, but we're like, we've got like a half an update baked for Tango Fiesta, and we could like do a DLC, and we could sell that, we could theme the DLC around Black Lives Matter and basically fighting fascism and highlighting the cast of characters from Tango Fiesta that were like more diverse, and sort of like just try and like make something out of that, and like maybe some places a report on it, and we can donate the sales to charities and that sort of thing. And I think it had the desired effect on the few people that saw it, and we got some really lovely messages. But sadly, it didn't really move the needle. But for us, it was as much about just feeling like we had any control over, or control is the wrong word, like able to have any effect, any change, like at all. Like I just remember days sat in the garden in lockdown, just feeling like completely out, like like you can't do anything, like we're just in the situation, and then seeing all of that like atrocious stuff happening, it was just too much. So it was cathartic, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the word. But like even today we get like people sort of going, oh my god, that's really wonderful. Like we're looking for a producer at the moment, and at least one person was like, oh hey, yeah, I'm just really glad that exists, like having done my research on you, like that's awesome. And it's like, good, that should be the main thing, right? Like I think having it be visible was the important thing. But yeah, so that's your potted Tango Fiesta like summary. And then, I mean, yeah, we've worked on a whole bunch of stuff that we can't point to because it no longer exists. We've made an MMO on a platform that's been shut down. That was Lazarus. That was amazing fun. And then we worked with a bunch of games on a platform called Crater, which was kind of like Roblox. And that got bought by Meta, by Facebook. And then it got shut down like a year later, which is a real shame. And again, those games like that we made, they're there, but you can't play them. So that's kind of frustrating. But amongst all of that, we did some exciting stuff that's basically ended up being this game called Trash Goblin, which is what we're working on now. And we can't wait to get it out. It's going to be brilliant.
Exactly. And that's a perfect way to segue into that point, because it's your upcoming hit. How has it been developing Trash Goblin from conception to where you are now?
An amazing ride. We went into it with our eyes open. We tried to be really sensible about what we were trying to achieve as the team that we are. Like, what can we do? What are our strengths? What shouldn't we try to attempt? Like let's make sure we can make this game and make it good and release it. And like not just let ambition be the thing that sort of sinks the ship or whatever. We've managed to find some amazing talent and hired some incredible people around it. I think people just resonating with it really well. I'll do the sales pitch. It's basically power sim for the D&D crowd, right? That's kind of like the whole thing. So you're a little goblin running a shop and you're cleaning trinkets and polishing them and cleaning and upcycling them and selling them to this like parade of fantasy characters. And yeah, it's been brilliant, and it's been weird because it started off as an idea that got sort of taken, like the setting and the characters and the tone from one project that we were working on called Cell Swords, which is still a prototype that we have internally, and another idea, a prototype that a student team made to our brief at Anglia Ruskin, and it was basically like a Picross game. A 3D Picross game where it's a puzzle game where you reveal objects by chipping away at like a kind of a Rubik's cube. And it was a really great demo, and we hired two of the people out of that team to come and work with us because we were like, right, that's a really strong idea for a core mechanic that we saw an opportunity to fit it into this like idea of like how can we have like a small scope game and this, that, and the other. And then fast forward to now, and we've had like this amazing Kickstarter experience that went really well, and we're really excited about that because we're going to self-publish it, and we've got this fan base that apparently really love it. Our Discord's just popping off every day, and we love having that like open development with our fans, and like the games just get better for it. So we're very nervous because we haven't self-published something in a while, like just on Steam on the open market, if you like. But we're really looking forward to seeing how people respond to it, and there's a lot of exciting moments between now and then. But it's just been really validating, I suppose, because like I said, the sort of the theme, the characters, the tone, the emotional beats, all of that's taken from a different project, which is actually like the third in a series of prototypes that we've been working on in various capacities over the years that's just stuck around, and we felt there was something there. And then seeing how the public have responded to this latest sort of incarnation of it has really made us think, yes, there is something there. It's not just us. It's not just the people we know in the industry saying, that thing you did, that was really interesting. Like, what's going on with that? We're like, well, now this is what's going on with it. And yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, it's great.
Yes, all the best with that release. So, of course, one thing that we have all noticed with Trash Goblin is how you absolutely smashed your Kickstarter goal. And that's not something I see often on the platform. So talk to me a little bit about why you think the Kickstarter crowdfunding attempt was so successful, and other funding opportunities that you've taken, not just on this game, but over your time, because you've got a ton of experience when it comes to acquiring funding for your games or your projects.
So Yeah, the Kickstarter went well because of the two primary things were we talked to the expert, which is a guy called Thomas Bido at a company called ICO Partners, who they are a marketing agency for games. They, like, for example, they did a chunk of the work for Baldur's Gate 3, right? So they're like big dogs. They know what's what. But he's a bit of a crowdfunding expert. And he does talks on it at GDC and all kinds. So basically, talked to him, picked his brains. We're very nice to him, and he's very nice to us as well. Got a little bit paid for a little bit of his time consulting, and just did what he said. But also, that was like a crap ton of hard work over basically like 8 months, if you include the actual running of the Kickstarter. So we went in eyes open. We planned, and a lot of that planning was based off of our learnings from like publishing games ourselves, launching games. Like, it's such a crucial thing, is like launching a game and understanding the amount of work of like just getting people to have heard about it and excited about it, all that sort of thing. So yeah, that was basically it. But I think a lot of it is also the game itself lent itself like to a structure that matches Kickstarter, right? So the idea that, you know, you have to offer rewards to people, and we've got all these amazing characters that we can put in the game quite easily. So let's base them off people who back us. Same, it's all about like collecting these weird trinkets and selling them. So like, why don't we just get people to send us like pictures of their favorite knickknack, and we'll put that in the game, and etc. So that it just sort of naturally matched, you know, the market there. And then yeah, looking at like funding in general. So I mean, we have done pretty much everything. I think, other than VC funding, which we basically don't want to do, which is where you get private companies or individuals to invest in your company. But yeah, we've pitched to publishers and secured funding that way. We've pitched to prototype funds and secured funding that way. We've pitched to UK Games Fund, like they do small amounts every year. They do like, I think it's 1 or 2 rounds a year or something like that. You know, the idea being to seed enough of a game that you could go and then pitch with that for publisher funding. Yeah, we've done Kickstarter. We've done work for hire. We've hired ourselves out individually and done consultation. I mean, it's just everything. And the rule was basically, if you're going to charge yourself out, do it at the minimum you should do it at is twice the cost of your time, because otherwise, for every day that you're not working on your thing, if you're just charging that day's value, you're not getting a day back.
Right.
All you're doing is pausing. You need to like increase the time you have left, the money that you have, right? So that's a thing. When it comes to pitching more widely, you just have to be so honest and brutal with yourself about the idea and the game or the project and what it is you're trying to make, how it matches what the person with the money wants to see, and then how it matches with your ability to demonstrate that you're the people to do it, right? So there's a lot of moving parts there. So I mean, one thing that we have a lot of experience of is essentially, you know, we're pitching a game that we want to make, and we want someone else's money to make it, right? And so you've really got to understand, like, why on earth are they going to give you that money, right? Like, right. Fundamentally, they don't want to, right? Like, they want to query why you above all these other people. So you have to be very, very honest and cutthroat almost with yourself about what it is you're bringing, right? Like, if you're pitching a game where the visuals for that genre, for that target market, visuals are really important, and you're not competitive with everything else that's out there doing well, that's not good enough, is it? You're not like you could take that risk with your money on it because you believe, but why would someone else, right?
Exactly.
Flip side, you know, are you making a game that the aesthetics don't matter, but it's all about the mechanical depth, and you have no experience demonstrated in making that mechanical depth? Maybe you do. Maybe you've got a prototype or demo that shows it, but you can't run on promises. You can't be like, oh, the last game we made was a multiplayer party game, and then this is like a grand 4x grand strategy game. You know, like, it's like, okay, so how convince me that you've got the skills, exactly, that sort of thing. So all of these angles, right, are really important, and you just got to kind of, you know, it's like I don't know, like column A, everything that you can see that they want, column B, everything that you can show that you do, and then how on earth do you convince them that all the missing gaps don't matter? That's basically it, right? Or how do you fill them? Our art's bad, I'll hire a really good artist. There you go. You know, but it's never that simple, is it?
No, but that is definitely the ideal situation, isn't it? I mean, I think part of your success has been taking your games to many show floors, including EGX. Tell me about that experience there, getting to see people play your games and, witnessing how they're, figuring things out in real time and all the feedback they've given you. How has that helped in your overall, I guess, Kickstarter campaign?
I think we're used to like having people play our game and tell us what they think about it, even if we didn't ask, as a result of going to the shows, and it's really valuable. I talked about like shipping games being a really important skill, and when you go to a show with a game, you've shipped it, right? You've had to make a build that is now outside of your control, and other people are playing it, and you learn so much. And honestly, back in the days with Tango Fiesta, with the publisher and stuff, it was great, really good fun. And you get lots of people coming and playing a game and giving nice feedback. And you'd be like, yeah, it's going great. And then you release it and you're like, oh, nobody's being nice about it. What's going on? And it's because in person, people are nice. People tell you nice things. They don't want to piss you off. So like the thing that you should do is try not to talk to them. And I don't mean that like weirdly. Basically, let someone just play the game and just watch what they're doing and observe. Like, don't. What is it they say? Words are cheap and actions are I don't know what you should pay attention to, right?
Right.
There's a more succinct way of putting it, but basically, yeah, watch what they're doing because that's honest. If they're making a face, are they stuck on something? Whatever, that's the important info. If you ask them what they thought, they're never going to say this is terrible. They're gonna like the worst they'll say is like, well, this, that, and the other could be better, and then you go, oh, so everything else is great. You're like, no, they didn't like it. They're not going to tell you. So that's really important. It's something that we thought we knew, but we didn't really strictly adhere to when we were making Tango Fiesta and games like that. But nowadays, yeah, much more focused about it, and being visible and being present and able to answer questions and get people excited about it. But honestly, the only positive comments, like the only sort of category, if you like, of positive comments or feedback that you should take seriously at those shows is when people flip out that they're so excited, right? Because that's honest response, right? They're not in control of how excited they are, and you can tell the difference eventually, right? You're like, oh, that person means it. That person's just being polite, and that's super useful. It's incredibly useful, and that's the biggest thing for us is like go to shows because the network effect and visibility is important, and the kinds of people who are looking around the indie booths and stuff, like content creators, things like that. It's how we met, right? It's that sort of thing is great. And it's long term, and it's hard to measure the value of it, but there is value to it, and you never know how it's going to multiply what you're already doing. But the thing for the game is that watching people play it, and it's tough. It's difficult, especially when you realize that when they're being polite, they actually don't like it. You're like, oh no. But then you can ask pointed questions. You can be like, okay, so this, that, and the other. What was it? Like, dive into it, get some feedback, and then eventually, again, you shouldn't just listen to every bad thing everyone says because everyone's different and everyone has different opinions, and the game will be different by the time it comes out. But
yeah,
there's always some truth in there. There's always something.
Yeah, I think that's a real skill, isn't it? And I guess that's more the transferable area, like the people skills, being able to sit through what is actually going to be beneficial to you building your game and what is just noise, effectively. It's always interesting that point. Like people are genuinely nicer in person. No one's going to tell you, yeah, this was like no one does that. So it's always going to be somewhat constructive, I'd like to believe. I mean, there is also the underlying fact that the game might just not be for them, which is different to they are a fan of this kind of game and it just doesn't click for them. So having to differentiate the two and work from that is a very important skill. Of course, as you said, not listening to everything because that's a recipe for disaster. You can't listen to just everything.
No, exactly. You can't please everybody. I mean, but it's a really good point actually. Like the fact that like for Trash Goblin more recently, because it's fresh in my head, we have like such confidence in the name and the key art because people's responses are just visceral to it. So a lot of people just walk past, sure, but a lot of people who do end up spotting it go, oh my god, or like Trash Goblin, what on earth? That's amazing, and they go and look, right? And then that's really useful because you'll see okay, they've formed something in their head. What is this game? They have an expectation of what the game is, and then they sit down, and then they'll either be like, this matches my expectation, which by the way would be a huge win, or it doesn't. And that's like, that's actually interesting, because that will translate when it's out on Steam or wherever, and you describe it one way and you present it, and then it's like, oh, that's not what I liked. Negative review. You know, that's really important. And for us, it was one of the reasons that we took all the puzzling out. Basically, it used to still have the numbers and the sort of the grid-based puzzling, the nonogram stuff. And we just stripped it out. We went to one show with it, and it was like, it's not sitting right with people. And let's try it without, like, not saying they're right, but it was enough people, enough honest response that was like, they're not. It's not jiving with what they expect from what we're saying it is. And then we took it out, and then it was like, massive difference. This is way better. And it was like, okay, there you go. So incredibly useful. If you've got your eyes open and you're open to the idea that, you don't know everything, right?
Yes. Oh, quick question on that. Were people specifically saying the numbers were jarring for them, or was that something that you just kind of figured out?
They weren't saying it in the way of, I expected one thing and I got another. They were just, there was a lot of confusion around the puzzles and around, like, you could tell people were like, I just wanted to chill out, and then I had all this like maths to do. It was like that sort of thing, and we were like, right, okay, so let's strip it out and see what happens. Like, it takes a step towards the more like vibe game, power wash, the kind of soothing, chill stuff, and it's better for it. And then we just lean on other mechanics to introduce the sort of depth is the wrong word, because there's nothing deep about any of Trash Goblin. But there's a lot of substance and a lot of like response from the game in other ways, right? And so we made a conscious decision to be like, okay, like wider and not as deep, and just try and satisfy people that way.
Oh, I mean, that's pretty impressive, because just thinking about it, I know I definitely would have found it tougher to play through if there were numbers everywhere. But yeah, obviously I didn't see that version, so I just thought this was really cool, very chill, and just fun, relaxing. Even though you are doing the tasks, you are carrying out something. It just felt a lot more relaxed and chilled rather than work, I guess, with the numbers. And a simple change like that, had such a massive effect.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation, Andrew. Thank you very much for taking the time. Please tell us how we can support Trash Goblin. Obviously, you've won the Kickstarter race, but how can people support your game?
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on. So Trash Goblin, remember it. Check it out on Steam. Go and wishlist it and follow it. That would be the biggest thing people could do for us, so that when we launch into early access, we get like a big out of the gate push with loads of people enjoying it and giving us loads of good feedback. That's what we want to do. And then, I mean, if you like what you see, maybe Google it on and look for the Kickstarter. That is finished, but we're also running more fundraising, and like you can get some of the rewards for that on our Patreon. So you can check out patreon.com/Spilt Milk Studios as well. And those are the sort of like the big moments. But fundamentally, if you're not sick of hearing me talk, or if you are and you'd rather just read the words in a text form, you could come and join the Discord, which is discord.gg/spiltmilk. We're very open, as hopefully you can tell. Got a load of lovely people on there. We're chatting with the community every day. We share behind the scenes stuff all the time. And we'd welcome people along. And even our game, or just like people who want to get into the industry or know more about development, that's what we're all about. So, yeah.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. We'll make sure to put all of those links in the description. And finally, Trash Goblin. When I saw that, I was like, oh, what's this? So, yes, great name. All of the Streamcasts are excited about that game. Akira can't stop talking about it. We all are very excited about it. Also, one thing I really wanted to mention as we close, the subtle anti-crunch message in the game. I love that. You can't just you can't just be at your desk working all hours of the day. The game will literally tell you it's time to stop, it's time to get some rest. And I think that's an important message for not just the games industry, but for all industries. So very happy
balance,
about that.
Right?
Exactly.
That's what it's all about.
Exactly. The life is too quiet and the work is too loud. The balance needs to change.
100%. I love it.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to follow the Streamcast, you can follow us on Streamcast _ on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. YouTube.com/Streamcast. Subscribe, like this video if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a comment. I'm sure you've got some questions that you'd like to ask our very esteemed guest Andrew here. Leave them here, and we'll see if we can answer them later on.
I'll be lurking. Don't you worry.
Yeah, there you go. Our podcast is also available on apps such as Spotify, where you can watch us, Apple, where you can listen to us, and many more. Please give us a review, rating, all of that good stuff. And we are on Twitch, Streamcast TV. And if you'd like to follow us anywhere else, go to our website, thestreamcast.co.uk. But with all that out of the way, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Stay safe. We'll see you on the next Streamcast.
Bye.